Greetings and salutations, this is Brian from Mechbladestudios. It's birthday time again, or at least near it depending on when this comes out. Either way, like last time, we're looking at something I consider a favorite of mine. This favorite is Shin Godzilla. This bit would make a lot more sense if they released that Kokyo Kyoku Shin Godzilla already. I briefly touched on this film when talking about Planet of the Monsters, but because I hold it in particularly high regard, and because one option I have for this episode disappeared before I can acquire footage, and the other is not YouTube friendly in the slightest, we're going to look at the reboot of the King of the Monsters in detail. Spoilers ahead, see the movie if you haven't. Shin Godzilla, or Shin Gojira, or Godzilla Resurgence, depending on your region, was released in theaters in Japan on July 26, 2016, and had a limited, then slightly extended run in the US, of which I got to partake twice, on October 11, 2016, as well as all these dates for all other territories. It was directed by Neon Genesis Evangelion creator Hideaki Anno and Attack on Titan live-action director Shinji Higuchi. Before getting into the normal film aesthetics, just take a look at Godzilla here for a second. Really take in all the horrific detail. The numerous scattered teeth, the beady, likely non-functional eyes, the mouth that opens much wider than any creature should ever have to, the emaciated spike-forming ribcage, the shriveled static arms, the black burnt keloid scarred skin, the tail that's twice as long as the main body and floats around on its own, and has a face and mouth on it. This monstrosity sprouted from Kamada-kun over here, a being so damn adorable that he developed his own fan base and merchandise. At one of the screenings I attended, some guy that decided to stand up in front of the screen before the movie started and give the lecture to us about it called this form Rubber Chicken Godzilla, and yeah, I'd say it's an appropriate name. Shinagawa-kun's in the middle. He's trying his best, looking more like a traditional Godzilla than the main Godzilla. The final form defies description, so I'm just gonna say all these evolutionary forms are among the more tame designs the production team came up with. They wanted to start with a normal Godzilla and make him weirder and more messed up as the movie went on, but Toho wouldn't allow it, but they allowed the reverse to happen. Also, Godzilla is completely made of CGI here, using motion capture, but with textures made to emulate a rubber suit. The results, given the general smaller budgets of Japanese blockbusters compared to American ones, are mixed, but good for the most part. Godzilla and Shinagawa-kun look reasonably real in a majority of shots, while Kamada-kun not as much. The fact that some of these shots made me think he's a suit or that animatronic they didn't use is amazing. He doesn't have an original roar of his own. Shinagawa-kun uses the 54 roars, and Godzilla uses his other Showa roars. On the normal side of aesthetics, the film has Anno's very distinct cinematic and editing style. Pillow shots for days, labels all over the screen, uncomfortable close-ups, and big establishing shots of boardrooms. Acting is hard to comment on because I don't speak Japanese, but everyone seems to be putting in decent performances, though some moments of English stand out. Poor Satomi Ishihara, who played Patterson, had a really tough time with the English, and she had to speak a lot of it, playing an American character.
I rushed to Yokota straight from a party, so I didn't have time to change.
There aren't that many action scenes in the film. Most of the film takes place in boardrooms with humans talking, but when the action does happen, it's a sight to behold. The effects work is pretty good in that regard, actually combining CGI and practical effects in some places. The music situation is interesting. Longtime Anno collaborator Shiro Sagasu has a lot of really cool original tracks. One of the two standouts is Persecution of the Masses, a song with an ominous chorus heralding Godzilla as a wrathful god, and one more song that I'll talk about later. The film also uses Akira Ifukube's classic themes from previous Godzilla films and Battle in Outer Space. A jarring sound decision is that the sounds of military weapons and some of Godzilla's attacks use audio from the older films, and they really stick out. The plot is rather straightforward on paper. The creature, later known as Gojira, that's actually called Godzilla first by the Americans, arrives on the shores of Japan. Japan tries and fails to stop him before he mutates and leaves. Some volunteers try to figure out how to stop him. He comes back as Godzilla. The military can't stop him. The Americans try to help, resulting in Godzilla getting pissed and lasering everything. The volunteers redouble their efforts to come up with a solution before the UN nukes Japan. They figure out a plan, the plan works, and Godzilla is frozen. If you look at the story that quickly, Shin Godzilla is a straight-up remake and reimagining of the 1954 film. And in many ways, it really is, right down to it being very politically charged. The original film was a response to both the World War II nuclear bombs and the Lucky Dragon 5 incident. This film was a response to the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, which resulted in the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster, all made worse by the Japanese government's sluggish response, directly mentioned and lampooned here, right down to the jumpsuits worn by multiple politicians in the film. Every move requires a meeting. Meetings are required to set up other meetings. The act of shooting the giant kaiju requires a slow chain of approvals, even when all necessary parties are present. An entire counterattack has to be scrapped when one pair of civilians is spotted rather than just having another helicopter go in and evacuate them. Experts, quote-unquote, with no idea what they're talking about are brought in to talk about the monster. Press conferences made to cover up the situation fail miserably compared to the spread of events on social media. While all this works in helping the film convey what it's trying to say, the political angle is perhaps hammered a bit too hard. It works during the first attack, but by the time we get to the second one, it gets tedious. Outside the Japanese government, the film has a more even-handed view on other topics. Nuclear energy can be incredibly destructive, but has its upsides and uses as reflected by the notion that Japan has to live with Godzilla at the very end, with the possibility of several scientific breakthroughs being reached by studying the frozen creature. America caused Godzilla to exist by dumping radiation in Japan's seas, but they lent their assistance to try to stop him on multiple occasions, and even that can go badly by pissing him off with bombers, or go better by distracting and wearing him out using drones. Other nations appear to think of Japan as unimportant enough to just nuke it if they can't stop Godzilla, but they all lend their aid through supercomputer calculation from Germany and chemical synthesis from China. Even the core element the film criticizes, committees, are looked at from both angles. Committees caused Godzilla to get stronger, but committees ultimately defeated him, thus Godzilla tried to adapt to become a committee himself. Now, these are all just simple observations on my part. I do not have any personal opinion on them outside the fact that it's interesting that they managed to look at both sides of several debates. There's also this subplot about the release of information through specific news outlets that's only addressed twice and never gets a resolution. Something that doesn't get a proper resolution but uses the ambiguity to its advantage has to do with background lore. At the very beginning of the film, a Coast Guard boat finds an abandoned boat at sea. Going inside, the Coast Guard finds a file written by a scientist called Goro Maki. He discovered Godzilla long before he became a problem and found he was eating the radiation dumped by the Americans. His wife died from radiation poisoning. Maki's final message among his notes was, "Do as you like." The Coast Guard also found a pair of shoes on the boat. Goro Maki himself never appears in person in the film. After the volunteer team is done talking about him, the camera cuts to this. Angles from maquettes, production stills, and other assorted media show a human skull and eyeball in the tail. Godzilla stands further upright than most incarnations, almost like a human. And I'll let you make your own conclusions from there. Human characters are hard to comment on, seeing as they're quite numerous and don't exactly talk about personal feelings or ambitions. Yaguchi doesn't like the established way of doing things. Patterson initially half-asses her assistance to the Japanese until personally seeing Godzilla's rampage and the incoming UN nuclear threat, and Akasaka is fine with the way things are, but not necessarily in a nefarious way. The film does have a local dere, though. Okashira is the local kudere that actually knows what's happening with Godzilla, while the other experts posture about nothing. Everyone else just runs together, but that's actually the film's intention. The protagonist isn't necessarily Yaguchi. Japan as a whole is a protagonist, and the humans we see are just tiny moving parts that make the protagonist work. Godzilla, despite looking like this, is probably the most tragic character. Every frame he's in shows him in agonizing pain. He's not roaring to assert dominance, nor is he roaring that much at all. That's the roar of suffering. He even roars when he becomes Shinagawa-kun, probably because the act of having vestigial arms rip out of his chest couldn't have been a comfortable experience. He's a lost animal just walking forward without any intentional malice towards the humans until they attack him with enough force that it actually hurts him. He attacks back at those that attack him, even if said retaliation appears to hurt him even more. That second standout song I alluded to is called Who Will Know, a song that takes place from Godzilla's perspective. He doesn't want to live, but he can't die, and he must fight to survive. It plays during the atomic breath scene. It's as chilling as it is sad. Overall, I give Shin Godzilla a 9 out of 10. Just because it's one of my favorites doesn't mean it has no flaws. It manages to replicate the 54 film's ability to present a kaiju film with 100% seriousness and succeed, while providing an entertaining and thoughtful story at the same time as showing a giant monster destroying Tokyo. One point is lost because of pacing. I'd say about 5 to 10 minutes of meetings could have been cut easily. Otherwise, this is easily one of the best films in the Godzilla series, and I highly recommend checking it out. So that's it for me for now. What do you guys think? Have you seen Shin Godzilla? Did you manage to catch it in theaters? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, leave a like and subscribe for more reviews of anime, video games, and movies. Also hit that bell icon so you know exactly when a new video goes up, and share this video with someone that might find it helpful. Thanks for watching. This is Brian from Mechbladestudios, signing off.